The screen is yours, Miyate. Please go ahead.
Akulo, Mesa period Kako, Yai Jizu Demare, Aku, Dinama speaker series, Ma, Pyogo, Yare, Tole, Jizu, Yai.
First of all, thank you, Egert, for introducing me to this series webinar, as well as, and I will be presenting first about the subnational parliament. So first, let me introduce a little about the parliaments. So with the 2008 constitution, the subnational parliaments came into existence, and they have been elevated by the constitution. According to the 2008 constitution, there are some essence of federalism in the constitution, so that there has been a form of a legislative branch as well as on the executive branch according to the constitution, and that according to the legislative powers in the Schedule 2 of the constitution, the states and regional parliaments can exercise them. In the first term, it was very clear that there was a winning, which was it was a Union Solidarity Development Party (USW) who was the winning party in the first term of the parliament. In the second term, NLD is the major party, the winning party in all the in most of the party. If we look at NLD, as apart from Rakhine State and Shan State, NLD is the major and is a major party in all the in the subnational parliaments. One thing we need to remind ourselves about the subnational parliaments is that in the subnational parliament, it is a bicameral system. We have the upper house and lower house called the Pidu Hluttaw and the Amyuda Hluttaw, and there is also a union assembly. So some people even call it there are three chambers, but however in subnational parliaments there is only one chamber, so it is a unicameral legislature system, and sometimes they play the dual role of the elected representatives. They are appointed in the cabinet of the local state and region. But one difference we have noticed is that under the NLD, that the dual role of the MPs, their percentage has significantly decreased. In the previous term, from 2011 to 2015, there were up to 65% of the MPs playing dual role in the state and regional parliament. But however, they are much less. In the maximum we have seen in this term is up to 35%. So it is also one of the reasons that has also strengthened the parliament as well. According to the research we have undertaken under the previous term, we have also indicated that the dual role is too much for the parliaments, and the parliament need to focus on the legislature, and then we can say that recommendation will be taken into consideration. Let's go to the next slide, Checker. When we talk about legislation and oversight in terms of effectiveness, we can say that in the subnational parliaments, there has been some there's been indication of effectiveness in the subnational parliaments, especially when we look at the legislative process. And there has been a practice of public consultation or no public hearing between the parliamentarians and the public, the constituencies they represent. That the parliamentary committees will go to the community. Sometimes they call it as a public consultation. In some way, they also call it as a public hearing. There are some slight differences in procedures, but they go to the community, they reach out to the community, and they listen more to the community. The photo I've shown here is in Bago region, where they were talking to the people, discussing the people about the land law that the regional parliament was drafting. So these improvements are what we hear not from the MPs, but from the civil society leaders as well as the local media that we have talked to, and they have noticed and they acknowledge there has been an increase in the public consultation. We'll go to the next slide now. If we look at this slide, the number of public consultations or hearings that have taken place in the term of the parliament is very clear. Some of the subnational parliaments are in the lead, and some are not. Let's go to the next slide. one thing we have noticed as improvement is that something we have witnessed and something we have evidence for is that if you look at the state and regional parliaments, or TOTOs as they are called in Myanmar language, after the 2015 election, once they came into power, there are a lot of things they have given priority to. So according to their constitution, that is also a way of the exercising the powers that they have been conferred to, but it is also a chance they are using for them to be able to represent their constituency more effectively. If we look at a good example will be the municipality laws. During our research, what we have noticed is that out of the 9 subnational parliaments in 5 parliaments, once they came into office, once the parliament is established, they first drafted the new universality laws. They did not just amend the law; they developed the law entirely. That in some parliaments they were just amending the previous law, but 5 of these subnational parliaments drafted the new law from the scratch. So by doing so, they were able to form newly established elected local municipal committees, and that has more representation, and there is more activeness in terms of the urban management, urban or rural management. If there are 5 committee members at the municipal committee, then they will have 3 as elected members and 2 appointed from the government agency. So there is more effectiveness. Next slide. In the next example,
ခြေကံဥပဒေကိုပြင်ဆင်ရမယ်
In the next slide, without amending the legislation, the situation is like emphasizing the legislative power of the legislatures. And the good example is the Moon State Fishery Law case. When we see that case of the fishery law case, in the Schedule 2, they have the right to amend the freshwater fishery only. But when we look at the state, according to the geographical state, they not only have the freshwater, they have brackish water and the near shore fishery areas also. So when they enact the fishery law, the professionalism of the legislative members and the president of the parliament, after they interpret all the laws and legislation in the fishery things, they name that law as a fishery law, excluding the terms that they obscure the fishery law and other thing. So these processes are
အဲ့တော့ထိန်းကျောင်းရေးလုပ်ငန်းစဉ် next slide အဲ့ဒီထိန်းကျောင်းရေးလုပ်ငန်းစဉ်တွေမှာပေါ့နော်ဒီပို့ပြီးတော့ထိရောက်လာတယ်ဆိုတဲ့အပိုင်းကတော့ပေါ့နော်ဒီဥပဒေပြုရေးနဲ့ဒီခုနဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ဒီထိန်းကျောင်းရေးပေါ့နော်ကော်မတီတွေအားကောင်းလာတာပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီထိန်းကျောင်းအဲ့ဒီကော်မတီတွေအားကောင်းမှုကိုပြောရမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဓိကအားဖြင့်ကျွန်တော်တို့လေ့လာအသေးစိတ်လေ့လာခဲ့တဲ့ဒီလွှတ်တော်တွေမှာအများနဲ့ကြားရတာဒီကော်မတီနှစ်ခုအထူးအားကောင်းလာပြီဆိုတဲ့ဟာမျိုးကြားရပါတယ်အဲ့တော့တခုကတော့အဲ့ဒီဥပဒေပြုရေးကော်မတီဥပဒေမူချမ်းကော်မတီလို့လည်းခေါ်ကြပါတယ်ဒီခါလေးတချို့လွှတ်တော်တွေမှာတော့ပို့ပြီးတော့ရှေ့လျက်ခေါ်ကြတာတွေရှိပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ဘယ်လိုပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်သူတို့လုပ်တဲ့လုပ်ငန်းတွေကတော့တူတယ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့ဥပဒေပြုရေးကော်မတီနဲ့နောက်တစ်ခုက budget ကော်မတီပေါ့နော်ဒါတွေအားကောင်းလာပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဥပဒေပြုရေးကော်မတီမှာကြည့်မယ်ဆိုရင်လည်းဥပဒေပြုရေးကော်မတီဥက္ကဋ္ဌတွေကိုလူမှန်နေရာမှန်တွေခံထားလာတာတွေတွေ့ရပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါအပြင်ဥပဒေပြုရေးကော်မတီတွေဟာခုနဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ပြင်ပပညာရှင်တွေထည့်သွင်းပြီးတော့ခါကျတော့ဖွဲ့စည်းလာတာတွေတွေ့ရပါတယ်အဲ့တော့နောက်တစ်ခုကပြင်ပပညာရှင်တွေကိုခုနတီးသန့်ဒါမှမဟုတ်ပြင်ပပညာရှင်အများစုပါတဲ့ခုနအထောက်အကူပြုကော်မရှင်တွေဒီလွှတ်တော်တွေနဲ့တွဲဖက်ပြီးဖွဲ့စည်းလာ
and in the legislative process, it become more effective. And when we talk about the budget committee, all the parliaments that we do research, both state and regional LUTO, and the budget oversight committees become more effective, and there are a lot of cuts and amendments in the laws of the things. And then we heard it not only from the parliament members, it's also from the civil society and the general public. In the budget committee, because of the reports, there are a lot of improvements. As examples, for example, in the Tenindai division and also the recent case in the Kaya state, we have a lot of examples. But state and regional and state parliaments, they don't have the surplus budget, and then especially they are only in the range of the ministers of the state and regional parliaments. It is, and then there are a lot of
ပေါ့နော်ဒီကုမ္ပဏီတွေကနေထည့်သွင်းကြပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီ funding မျိုးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လည်းခုနတိုင်းဒေသပြည်နယ်လွှတ်တော်တွေရဲ့
So with the corporate social responsibility, it hasn't really some of the powers have not really reached the subnational parliament. So some of the issues need to be taken into consideration. Now I would like to talk about the constitutional barriers that the subnational parliaments are facing. So let's go to the next slide, please. And these barriers from the constitution have existed in the first term, especially the Schedule 2 of the 2008 constitution. The legislative powers that have been handed over to the subnational parliaments are not clear. They are ambiguous in such a way that it's quite difficult for the subnational parliaments to exercise their legislative mandate. If you look at there are also some of the provisions that also mentioned very clearly that under the 8 major sectors, there are also 45 provisions where they were given areas that the state and regional parliament can enact laws. But however, there is a wording that was it says that it should be the laws that the state and regional parliaments and that should be in accordance with the law enacted by the union. So that means that they are still under very well under the mandate of the union. So to what extent can the subnational parliaments enact the law? So they are not clear. So when they are not clear, they don't dare to move on. Or some of the laws were pending, and some of the laws are like even considered as dead laws because they cannot move forward anymore. And these are some of the things we have heard from the subnational parliaments, that they may be given powers to enact laws, but however, their legislative powers are also restrained by such a provision in the constitution. Is actually so it's only given in the laws. It's sort of, they give the example of like the union is taking everything, they are grabbing everything until the end. So what can we do? And these are some of the words that we have heard that resonates among a lot of subnational parliaments, especially from the speakers as well as of the chairmen of the committee. So let's go to the next slide. So that if we look at the land revenue law, in the previous term, there are a lot of delays in terms of enacting the land revenue law. If we look at the land revenue law, in the 14 of the subnational laws, 12 of them have already enacted the law, but they cannot enforce them. And the fact that there were like more state parliament who were the lead in the enacting this law, and they were they have already raised the issue to the Myanmar Constitutional Tribunal and to the president office, but their plea were not successful, so they were not able to implement the land revenues and collect the revenues from it. So because of the union level laws, that the union level laws are in power, they are still enforced. So when these laws become barriers, and that they are sort of like going against each other, so that the regional parliaments are restricted by that provision. It's not just for the land revenue law, it's for the excise law, it's for the other laws that are according to the constitution schedule that the state and regional parliaments should be able to enact, and yet they are hindered by this certain provision mentioned in the law. So there are limitations in terms of legislative efforts, like the fishery law, and they were not able to. And then if you put fresh water, so they have to stop with the fishery, as well as the community-based tourism, the mining, small-scale mining, and such. So for the small-scale industry, so it's quite difficult. Let's go to the next slide. Another perspective I would like to share is that what will be the implications after the elections of 2020? The key will be, before I start with that, and I would like to comment on the composition of the parliament and their landscape. So let's go to the next slide. In the next slide, we have, as you all know, NLD is the major party, the winning party with the highest number of seats. They represent 75% in all the state and subnational parliaments, 45% in the states, and 94% in the regional parliaments. They are the highest. They have the highest number of parliamentarians in the subnational parliaments. They are majority in 12 out of 14. There are two only exceptions, which is Shan State and Rakhine State. Ethnic-based political parties only have 30%. They are higher in they have higher representation in the states with 32% and only 1% in the regions. If we look at this term, I mean, compared to the first term, 2010, 2015, in the first term, there was ethnic-based party used to have 60% in the previous term. And in terms of women MPs, there is a total of 13%, 8% in the states, and there's 10%, 16% in the region. So altogether 13. There were only 3.8% in the first term. So if let's look at election, and I'm sure you're aware that there has been a Union Election Commission that announced that election will be cancelled in certain parts of Myanmar. And what is the effect? If we look at the Rakhine and Shan, there are a lot of constituency where the election has been cancelled, though there has been given us a lot of food for thought. But if we really go deep and we see the impact is much more stronger, more broad and broader on the Rakhine Parliament, because Shan State Parliament, even before, if we look at the previous term, you have an area like Wa area, what's the area, you have the Mala, and there's some 6 townships. The five of them didn't have the election even in the previous term. So there are only one additional township, Mongai. So it's not that important. So it does not. There are impacts, but it's not as important as in Rakhine State. But in Rakhine State, the implications will be serious, and that. This is my calculation, my analysis is also based on the first announcement of UEC, where they canceled the election in 9 townships. That will mean that there will be 41% of the military MPs, and then the athletic MPs their numbers will be reduced. However, UEC had announced that some of the constituency in 2 townships, some areas, not all the townships, so there were a bit more. I think there have been some improvement. So there will be about 64% and 36% for the elected MPs and military MP respectively, according to some new amendments made by the UEC. But if we look at the Rakhine State Parliament in this context, even without the cancellation of the election, because of the ongoing armed conflict, Rakhine State Parliament is facing a lot of barriers and challenges, and Rakhine State government also has a lot of difficulties due to the armed conflict. With the election cancellation, after the election, if there is some armed conflict, if the armed conflict continues, then the Rakhine State Parliament will not be able to implement development in Rakhine State in the same for the Rakhine State government. They will be facing a lot more limitations in terms of state development. I would like to now explain discuss about the role of the ethnic parties in terms of subnational and national parliaments. I would like to first explain with the first term.
2015မှာတော့ပြည်သူ့လွှတ်တော်မှာတိုင်းရင်းသား
And also in the state and region that I mentioned, during 2010 it is 16%, and in 2015 it is 13%. So after this coming election, my vision, I'm just visualizing that according to my research and also from my experiences in Shan and Mon and Kachin, especially the party's name and also with the ethnic parties campaign area, there will be a lot of seats that we are going to increase, and in some places there are some seats that USDP is popular already, and in some places the NLD party is still popular. Before, the ethnic parties are 32%, and then now there are possibility that they can be increased to 42 to up to 50%. In the state, in the regional areas, there are only 1% for the current time, and then maybe the opportunity is only 1 to 2% of increase, especially in Zagain and Ayeyarwady Loto. Well, I would like to emphasize a little bit about women candidates. The women's participation. Next slide, please. When we look at the women's participation in the picture that I am showing, 2010, 2015, and 2020, the candidates, they are not yet members, but they are candidates. These are the participation of women in the political parties. It was 44%, and then in 2015 it was 13%, and 2020 it is 16%. And according to the statistic below, and these are the candidate women candidate increase percentage. So in order to summarize that, in 2015 the percentage of women candidates increased. The elected candidates percentage also increased dramatically. During the 2015, there were only 3.8%, but in this term, it is 13%. And for this term, the women candidate percentage is increasing, but not as we expected, but it is still increasing. I think the elected women percentage will be also probably increased by 16% after the election. So when we look the increase of 4% to 16%, it is a very dramatic increase. We can say that there will be a lot of opportunity for the women to increase in the parliament if the political party increase the candidates in the thing, and there are a lot of things such so on. I would like to suggest there are a lot of things I would like to suggest or recommend. So let's go to next slide, please.
ဒီအပိုင်းကိုတော့ကျွန်တော်မြန်လေးပဲပြောသွားပါမယ်။ဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့မေးခွန်းမေးချက်အချိန်မှာလည်းကျွန်တော်တို့ပြောရအောင်မှရှိနေပါတယ်
I'll go quickly on this because I want to give time for question and answer. So what are the major recommendations? There are a lot of structural barriers due to the constitution and we need to change them. But then amendment of the constitution or drafting a new constitution, is really tight and it's a very complicated situation. I think so we need to focus more on something, focus more on the making sure that the state and regional parliaments can use that will be able to exercise the mandates, and they should be able to amend the laws, which are the union level laws that could be adapted to that will be adapted to the local context. So that is something they can do. That will be that, and also another part is for to work on the legal interpretation. Legal interpretation needs to be more effective, and another important thing we can do is to strengthen the constitutional tribunal of Myanmar. That according to the panel, the last panel peace conference, Union Peace Conference, according to the Union Peace Accord, that in addition to the Constitution Tribunal, they want to amend the Constitutional Tribunal into the Constitutional Court, and that is one of the agreements of the Penang Union Accord. If there is a Constitutional Court, then the court will be able to bring more inclusiveness to the current Constitution. So that could help decrease the impact of the cultural barrier, so that the state and regional parliaments will be able to overcome them. Another important part is also we also need to look at how what are the impacts of this legislation. So we need to check whether is there a post-legislative effectiveness. So we would like to encourage comparative studies of the different subnational parliaments to see how effective their laws are. Another important part is also about the about the different state and regional parliament that they should be able to work on, that they should be able to work exchange among the state and regional parliaments to be able to work. By working collectively, they might be able to find ways to overcome the structural barriers imposed by the union law as well as the constitution. There should be more of a peer exchange and peer learning among different state and regional parliaments, so they will help them through this kind of regular coordinating mechanism. Next slide, please. They will also need more interaction, more exposure, not only to the constituency, but also the civil society organizations, so that they'll be able to hear more of the voice of the people, the voice of the community, as well as the civil society. So rather than Yangon-based mainstream CSO, what is more important is that we should focus on the state and regional civil society organization, local media, so the local civil organization will be more effective in keeping an eye and being a watchdog of what is happening in the state and region. It is so important to strengthen their roles. In addition, the capacity of the parliament officers are very limited. They need to be able to support them in terms of research and the statistics and data. So that kind of recruitment is still a challenge. And they don't have the means. The parliaments do not have the financial ability to recruit so we will need, by linking with the international organizations or local national organization, to provide them with the funds so that these parliaments will have human capacity, and that will be able to take on important jobs. For the long run, I think it is also important to continue supporting these subnational parliaments, as well as on the parliamentary offices that we also need to develop a pool of professionals who will be working on this in support of the parliament. So I would like to conclude my presentation here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mia Ted, for a very comprehensive view of the status of the subnational parliaments, but also connecting it to the current election and that is approaching election period that is approaching very fast. We would like now to turn to a commentary from the Parliamentary Center of Canada. And to do this, we have two very dynamic people who have a lot of experience in Myanmar. One is Mr. Ivo Valinov. He's the Director from Partnerships and Program Development. And his comments will be followed by Thomas Cormier. Tom, he's a new President and CEO of the Parliamentary Center of Canada starting this April. So we welcome both of them to provide their comments. And just as we move into the commentary section, I encourage you to enter your questions in the messaging box on the right. If you have if you're asking a question, please identify yourself. This is a way of trying to understand who else is on the other side of the screen. We have about 100 people registered in the stock, and would like to know more about you. So please feel free to identify yourselves with your question. You can write your question in English or Burmese. Your question will be brought to the front. One last thing we have now, we will have the session go still for another 30 minutes. So we have plenty of time for questions, but you can start thinking about them. Without further ado, I go to Ivo for commentary. The floor is yours, Ivo. Go ahead. we're not hearing you, Ivo.
I think we might have lost you.
Okay, we have, what about Tom?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tom. So, Tom Cormier, you can go first.
Great. Please, Ivo, let me know if you can join us. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank RDRC for another inspiring discussion that they've facilitated, and it's a pleasure for Parliamentary Centre to participate in these reflections. I do also want to thank Nay Pyi Taw for her really interesting analysis and presentation that I think both underscores the importance of subnational parliaments and why we need to learn more about them, but also why we need them to work more effectively, why we need them to be better bridges to the community, and also better players in Myanmar's continued development as a democracy. We had a couple of things that we wanted to talk about, and one is, again, to echo some of the things that Nay Pyi Taw mentioned in terms of why it's crucial for the strengthening of subnational governments in Myanmar. Clearly, as Nay Pyi Taw laid out, the constitutional powers are somewhat limited. However, as they become more active, they are getting attention. They are developing new dialogue with the union government, and I think they are becoming players and allowing people at the local level to see their elected officials having an impact on important developments as Myanmar continues to deepen its democratic transition. They are able to take action in becoming more involved in supporting local economic development in different ways, and they're testing as well the constitutional framework of Myanmar in important ways. Another thing to always keep in mind as well is the opportunities for different political configurations at the subnational level. As Nay Pyi Taw points out, there are in some places a much more voices of ethnic parties and ethnic groups, and they may have more say at the local level, or more influence over dialogue and debate. And in some places, it represents a different political composition, which is very important to ensure that there's political voice given to groups that somehow over the years have felt marginalized or without voice. And issues under the states and regions really do touch people's lives in practical ways. And so it's important that we continue to strengthen the relationship between elected officials and their constituents, because these elected officials, while their powers may be limited, are able to advocate for and achieve development outcomes that are in the best interest of local communities. We know that the elections are likely to bring a new set of parliamentarians, including, we hope, more women and different party configurations. There is going to be some, we'll see some coalition building and some merging of parties, and to see what impact that has on the makeup of these legislatures. And there will be a need for continued support of the staff of these parliaments to make sure that those new members are supported well. One of the things to always keep in mind too, in most countries, subnational parliaments are always an important training ground for national leadership. And legislators who learn how to be elected representatives at the local level oftentimes understand local concerns well. They develop strong networks at the grassroots level, and when they go to the national level to get elected, they take these networks with them, and they take the importance of local engagement with them. So it's a really great way to invest in future leadership. And also, I think one of the things that, as we looked for ways to engage, looking at digital tools to both present positive opportunities for more engagement, but also to reflect on some of the challenges we've seen with disinformation that we should be mindful of and look to take action on. If we look at areas where we think Canada and the international community can provide support to make a difference, I would probably categorize these in 5 main areas. And the first one is obviously as stated by Mya Taw, we need to continue to build the capacity and structure of nonpartisan parliamentary administrations. So to look at how that staff is now becoming more institutionalized, separated from the executive, and build on the support and the progress that has already been made in investments to date. And this includes continuing to support the development of legislative research capacity so that staff of parliaments can help members of those elected bodies to make informed decisions about potential policy recommendations and local laws. If you look at the Shan State Parliament and the pilot that we were involved with, thanks to the cooperation with Enlightened Myanmar and the support of IDRC, I think it has attracted the attention of other legislatures who want to know how to increase their capacity. So I think it's an opportunity to build stronger links with academic institutions, think tanks, and other civil society groups, obviously including women's organizations. And keep in mind that legislative researchers are not normally engaged in primary research. They need to be able to reach out to others in external sources to help in their analysis. The other thing is to strengthen the internal organization and structure of parliamentary administration so that we support the capacity to do public outreach, to do public meetings and hearings. That needs to be supported. Number two, I would really look at supporting women to be effective legislators, leaders, and peacemakers. And I would say that women bring important networks, knowledge, and experiences to politics that need to be heard. This can result, we know from research, in more balanced decision-making and more effective development outcomes. So we want to make sure that there's support for women parliamentarians to build practical skills, such as networking, coalition building, communication, and lawmaking, policy and analysis skills, to help them be more effective in their work. Women's voices are also important for efforts to achieve durable peace settlements, and serving in elected positions can elevate their status in the community and bring more important opportunities for them to exercise that leadership in formal and informal ways. So I think support for women elected leaders to take an active role in peace processes can pay important dividends. And lastly, I think it's important as well that their male colleagues in Parliament also are equipped with similar skills of policy analysis and legislative skills, but also that we help them to appreciate the value that women bring to decision making so that they can become champions for increased representation. Number three, I would say, is to support civil society to learn more about state and regional parliaments and opportunities to engage in different ways. And this means learning how to network and effectively advocate, which are key, but also helping them to learn about the need for local legislatures to have robust and professional support so that they can become important agents of change, and to be able to be advocates of strengthened local parliaments. Obviously, this needs to be coordinated with efforts that are supporting similar interactions at the union level. Obviously, continued support to organizations like MREF that are dedicated to both strengthening parliaments, but also understanding their importance and their impact. I think the more we learn about the potential for parliaments, the more able we're going to be as an international partner to be able to provide effective support. Number four, I would say, as was raised by Mya Taw, is to support more regular and structured state and regional legislature engagements with both counterparts at the state and region level, but also at the union level. This will help foster collaboration needed to tackle complex policy issues that require input from all levels, but also it's really important to avoid conflicting responses and also to avoid constitutional challenges that could hamper development. I would also underscore the need for us to depend on and develop more tools to turn digital communication into structured digital engagements for a more constructive and safer environment, both for individual MPs and for parliamentary committees, to engage with communities in new ways and to use that technology to help people become more informed about their legislatures and to be able to interact in different ways. And last but not least, I would just underscore the need for coordination among donors and implementers. There are more players working at the subnational level, and I think it's important that both on the donor side and on the implementer side, we really coordinate between organizations and with local players like MREF to make sure that we are sharing as much information as possible so that we can help replicate things where it's relevant, but also to avoid overlap or conflicting programming which could hamper development. So
thank you very much, Tom. That especially the last point, it really resonates loud and clear among the different people contributing from the outside. Ivo, you're next. Would you like to share your thoughts, please? Ivo Balina from the Parliamentary Center.
Thanks, Edgar. Well, I was, I think because of a small technical issue, I couldn't jump in earlier. So what Tom offered was actually our joint comments. I wouldn't really add much to that, other than perhaps probably strengthening one point about the importance of building local capacity or local organizations, and bringing up the example with MREF, but I'm sure there's others from different experiences, where we worked together on an initial project on building legislative research capacity, and very shortly after that, other regions, other subnational parliaments came with similar requests, and MREF was able to take the lead and address that on their own. So in a country with 14 subnational legislatures, it's quite important to have this investment in sustainability where local organizations can multiply an initial effort by the international community.
Mm-hmm. Very good.